be with him over the next couple of days. And I want to especially thank Student Minister Charles Muhammad, who is my brother and friend, for giving us an opportunity to come to this very special and sacred rostrum, the great, historic, and legendary Muhammad's Mosque, number 32, again in Phoenix, Arizona. The city of Phoenix has a very special place for all of the members of the Nation of Islam, as this is the city chosen by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad to take up a residence in, and it has always been a city that has actually fed the entire nation of Islam spiritual wisdom, truth, guidance, and insight. You cannot come to Phoenix, Arizona, and certainly not acknowledge and pay homage and tribute to the great Minister Demetric Muhammad. Thank Allah for Minister Demetric because it was through his articles and his writings, Farrakhn the Traveler, a special spokesman, closing the gap, God's man on the straight path, that all of us little brothers and sisters around the country began to be fed and nursed properly on not just the political or the social message of the Nation of Islam, but also being able to see this great wisdom and message in the divine light of Scripture. So we want to kind of look at some Scripture today. We want to kind of look at our big brother today, and we want to see if we can identify the hand of God, not just on the pages of ancient sacred texts, but we want to also be able to see the hand of God inside current events. One of the most powerful attributes of the Nation of Islam's ministry, especially that of the Honorable Minister Farrakhn, is that when you come to hear the minister, you know you're going to hear Bible and Holy Quran made plain right up to the modern time. When we look in the Bible and the Quran, our minds are not stayed in the past. But we look at the Scripture, then we look up at the world around us to see what parallels can we draw from Scripture to the time in which we live in. And that's what gives us the power. That's what gives the message of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad power to literally transform human life. So I'm going to multitask a little bit here, brothers and sisters, and get my presenter view up here. Bear with me. Now, as you know, beloved brothers and sisters, the news in the world has really erupted. Over this beautiful photo. Can you see the photo? No. Okay, there we go. Everybody's talking about this beautiful photo. And we wanted to just, first of all, thank Allah, because, you know, in the Nation of Islam, we're getting ready for Savior's Day. It really is the crowning event of Black History Month. And so, you know, this has really kind of helped us in promoting Savior's Day, because after 1995, the mainstream news media, they adopted a policy of ignoring the Honorable Minister. The Million Man March proved to them, because you see, they were never going to give the minister any positive coverage. But the Million Man March proved that even negative coverage, the minister benefited from. So this is helpful to us that now throughout social media, the 6 o'clock news, newspapers, even in the Wall Street Journal, they're mentioning the name of Farrakhn. And so I was intrigued at how, once again, the leaders of the Jewish community, they began to decry the fact that former President Obama, when he was a senator, a photo. Come on, guys. With the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhn. He didn't say anything about the minister. He didn't say, I believe I'm going to be a Muslim now. He's just on a photo. And so my mind went to the scripture, the crucifixion of Lazarus. Now, that may be intriguing. Many of us grew up, as America is a Judeo-Christian society. We grew up and we knew something of the crucifixion of Jesus. But we want to talk about today also the Jewish leaders plot to kill Lazarus. Right. And so, in this controversy, powerful members of the Jewish community have spoken out. Alan Dershowitz, the famed attorney, he said that if he had known that Senator Obama had taken a photo with Minister Farrakhn, he wouldn't have even campaigned for him, and he's a Democrat. This man went on to say of our beloved leader and teacher, Louis Farrakhn is a virulent anti-Semite. He called Judaism a gutter religion. He's anti-American. He's horrible. He's a horrible human being. Wow. The ADL, the new ADL leader, Jonathan Greenblatt, he came out. He was in Israel, calling once again for former now President Obama to denounce the minister, to repudiate Farrakhn. And all he did was take a photo. Now, these kinds of statements from the powerful Jewish community, we take very seriously. Because they have a history of using these type of tactics to intimidate prominent men and women. The Bible says in the book of John, the 12th chapter, when all of the people heard of Lazarus, when they heard of Jesus' arrival, they flocked to see him and also to see Lazarus, the man Jesus had raised from the dead. Then the chief priests decided to kill Lazarus too, for it was because of him that many of the people had deserted them and believed in Jesus. Think over that. They had not only to determine to kill Jesus, but they had also determined to kill the man that they blamed for Jesus' growing fame, popularity, and notoriety. The crucifixion of Lazarus. What does the Jewish controversy mean for Black America? Is this something that Minister Farrakhn, because he's so bold and courageous, he just over here by himself, challenging and meddling with members of the Jewish community? Or is this directly connected to the divine destiny of a people who have endured more than 4 centuries of slavery, suffering, and death? Bring it out. I'm fascinated that in President Obama's book, Dreams of My Father, he talks about his presence at the Million Man March. And I said, maybe they don't want the president's or Senator Obama's ascendancy to the office of the president to be connected as an outcome of the Million Man March. But he talks about him being inspired, and he thought that it was a magnificent assembly, and he was present. Right. He just said that, it was not a good enough follow-up strategy. And the minister said, well, my God, if I bring 2 million Black men to Washington, D.C., could not other intelligent brothers and sisters help me with the follow-up prayer? Let's keep it real. When we was in the streets, everybody put 5 on it back then. Everybody did their part. Many hands make light work, right? That's right. If you got a man who can magnetize and draw nearly 2 million Black men, how come then Senator Obama and other intellectuals and academics say, Minister, this is a proposal for how to follow it up? But at that mall message, we can clearly see that the message of the minister is directly related to how then Senator Obama may have been inspired to run for office. The minister told all of us who were there. He talked to us about going back and making our communities safe and decent places to live. And in fact, there's actually documented evidence that thousands of young black children who didn't have a mother or father, they became adopted. Many black organizations saw an influx of black male membership. You saw fathers determined to get back in the lives of their sons. You saw sons determined to forgive their father after many years of being angry with their father and their mother.
Yes, sir.
There are all kinds of metrics that we can look at to see the impact of the Million Man March. Perhaps the leaders of the Jewish community recognize that Senator Obama's becoming President Obama is one of those positive outcomes. We saw what they said in John chapter 12. But did you know, brothers and sisters, in 1994, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League of Benin Britain, they issued a report called The Legitimation of Louis Farrakhn. You know, these people got some nerve, man. I'm just telling you. They got some nerve. As if to say our minister is by himself illegitimate. But in their report, they're the ones who are really illegitimate. We're going to talk about that as well. But Stephen Freeman begins to discuss why the Jewish leaders were upset that now so-called mainstream black leaders, entertainers, celebrities, and politicians, organizational heads, they were inviting Farrakhn to their conferences. They were on photos with the minister. They appeared to be befriending a man that they had not gotten the Jewish leaders' permission to befriend. We all remember that in 1993, Rabbi David Saperstein, he told the leaders of the Civil Rights Organization when they were getting ready to commemorate Dr. King's March on Washington. And at that time, and it is still today, the most popular speaker and teacher in the country is the Honorable Louis Farrakhn. So it's intelligent if you're planning an event, you want someone that can draw and magnetize the people. So they invite the minister, but they didn't get the Jews' permission. So Rabbi Saperstein chastised, and I think about this now. These are supposed to be your leaders, your voices, your spokespersons, the smartest ones among us. Yet they are subject to a greater power that is a white power that you and I, most of the time, don't know nothing about. And so they rescinded their invitation for the minister to come and address the people. But Freeman, using coded language, I see a lot of brothers, I know the brothers, we've all seen the movie The Godfather.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Sister said, we've seen it too, brother. But you remember the Godfather uses coded language. He said, make him an offer he can't refuse.
That's right. Come on.
That doesn't mean, we all know, that doesn't mean take him out and buy some ice cream. That's a nice way of saying something very nasty, very sensitive, very diabolical. So Mr. Freeman said, we want to impose an obligation on anybody who will deal with Minister Farrakhn, who will give him a platform, who will, quote unquote, help to make him appear legitimate. That's fascinating. Because it was in the life of Jesus that the Jewish leaders tried to say of Jesus, he was an illegitimate child. But they were crafty by saying, and we be not born of fornication. Intriguing, but we'll get into that. So they went on a long campaign of punishing, ridiculing, and intimidating any prominent person who would acknowledge the good of Minister Farrakhn. And see, for those of us whose lives have actually been saved and transformed and renewed and been given a purpose because of Minister Farrakhan's courage and sacrifice to rebuild the Nation of Islam, we take this very, very seriously. We were coming up, we played dozens. You know, it was good until you talked about our mom. Those were fighting words. So, you know, the minister, he has loved us in a maternal way. So we don't take kindly to those besmirching our minister, our spiritual father and mother, really. And we certainly don't take kindly to those who try to put obstacles in the pathway of his word. So this was a member of the Jewish community, Mayor Edwin Rendell. Philadelphia, he was the mayor of Philadelphia. He went on to become the governor of Philadelphia. And he invited the minister to come in because there was about to be a race war in that city in a place called Gray's Ferry. You can actually watch what Mayor Rendell says on the internet. But he talked about the virtue of the Nation of Islam under Minister Farrakhn's leadership. And this was a Jewish mayor calling Minister Farrakhn to come and save his city. Think over that. In other words, minister, if you don't come, we got a boiling coal. But do you know his own Jewish brethren condemned him? A man who is practical enough to say what would be good for the city. May not like the minister personally, but what would be good for the city? Although when you read the statement, it appears that he has a very favorable view of the minister and the nation. Right. Many of us remember when actor Bruce Willis said, if I were black, I would be with Farrakhn too. The minister said, Mr. Willis, you can be with me regardless of what you're coming in, because I'm a man of principle and I'm committed to truth. But the ADL under Abraham Foxman at the time, they threatened Bruce Willis that if he did not take his words back, he wouldn't be able to work in Hollywood. Right. This is a part of something else called the Farrakhn litmus test. Professor Derek Bell has talked about. Professor Derek Bell called the minister smart and super articulate. Minister Farrakhn is perhaps the best living example of a black man really willing and able to tell it like it is, regarding who is responsible for racism in this country. Every black person important enough to be viewed as asked to condemn Minister Farrakhn. Isn't that fascinating? It is. Who is Farrakhn? I mean, it's almost you could be running for be the scout leader of your Boy Scout. You could be in the church and they're about to make you the lead soloist. You got a few questions for you. Got a few questions. Really just one. What do you think about Farrakhn? Like, you really know? But I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, this opposition, even though we don't like it, it helps to expose the truth of the minister's identity in the light of Scripture. Some of my young brothers and sisters who our favorite art form has been hip-hop and its culture. It's a cultural phenomenon. Part of this strategy of the crucifixion of Lazarus, we saw it appear again in the build-up to 10-10-15 Justice Around. Where the minister literally came out and did a video and began to speak into the controversy because many young brothers and sisters in the hip-hop community, a lot of them, they were just learning of the minister. And they said, man, they sit back watching on YouTube and they see a man talk like that. A lot of young people thought that that kind of power, that kind of courage, that type of strength was a thing of the past. So you had groups like Migos and the Game and others being introduced to the minister. They want to take a photo with the minister. Now, these are young people who have millions of followers. They sell millions of MP3 downloads and clothing, and their brand is large. And the fear of the Jewish leaders is that like Lazarus, they would help to legitimize or add to the fame and popularity of a man that we are really trying to crucify. Yes. So the minister talked about how many of the artists, after they posed on social media with a photo with him, they immediately got into some type of legal trouble. Right. Now, to be clear, the minister says, I have been watched by the ADL, and then they're stalking of me and watching those who embrace me. I've noticed that if you come and sit with me and I give you good counsel, good advice, the next thing I know, my brother rapper has been arrested, said Minister Farrakhn. Know that when you visit with me or take a picture with me, it upsets them. I know that they are trying to put fear into you, people. So sure enough, the ADL told all of their subscribers on their website, look at what's taking place. Farrakhn is receiving support from the rappers, who all of them have millions and millions of followers. And so social media has actually helped the minister overcome the hurdle and the obstacle of not receiving any media coverage. Because they really, you have to remember, in J. Edgar Hoover's COINTELPRO memo, one of the specific action items was to not allow so-called black nationalist groups to have a youthful membership. Keep them separated from the young. So over the course of the life of this strategy, this controversy between the minister, the Nation of Islam, and the Jewish leaders, one of the things they have done is made it to where hardly any of the minister's representatives, and certainly not the minister, could speak on the college campus. Because no movement, no idea, even that which is divine, it is severely hampered if we cannot have young people to take it on into the future. And so Freeman put in his memo, he said, we know that ADL ain't going to make Farrakhn go away. So they understand the older generations, people like Brother Charles and Sister Aisha and others, they can't do nothing with them. They can't buy them. They can't try to corrupt them. If you put them in prison, they're going to convert the whole jail. So the elders, they know they can't do nothing with the elders.
No, that's right.
See, but remember, this is critical. Not that critical. But remember, when they made our forefathers and mothers slaves, they didn't take Africans from Serengeti, Ghana, and make them slaves. Because I don't know if you've ever seen in Africa where they see the kings wear the lion's skin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes.
You know they didn't go and get that as a spot. Just saying. If you see them wearing the lion's skin, it's because they actually killed a lion. Not with a gat. I know what you think.
No.
Like, yeah, man, I stay strapped. I'll kill a lion. No, not like that. I'm talking about an African that may weigh 160 pounds, not 6 feet, ain't got no Kevlar jacket or nothing on, ain't got none of the stuff that they have on at the zoo. They have on nothing but loincloth and a spear. But coupled with the knowledge of his elders, he takes that spear, and as a rite of passage in many tribes, he will kill the lion. I'm just making a point. You don't take a man like that and make him a slave. You can try it, but you won't be able to rest at night. Because that's a man that don't have no fear. And the woman that produced him, she don't have no fear. The point is that when they were brought over here and had babies, the babies were raised as slaves. So the connection between the minister and the youth between the elders and the youth must be strengthened. This is me on a slight soapbox tangent, Minister Charles, but I'm really passionate about this. Because as a father, I want to see my children come into that which I believe in and carry it on to the next level, take it farther than what I could take it. And sometimes as parents and as elders, we are oblivious because we're in the day-to-day grind of trying to work the mission. But Satan has the attention and the mind of our children right inside our own home. I don't believe. I just have a problem with the fact that I should be able to convert someone who's a stranger, and I can't convert someone that lives in my house, under my roof, eating my food. Whether we are Muslim, Christian, or whatever our spiritual belief is, we need to understand that, yes, it may appear that Satan is not after us. It's because he's looked past us and he's ensured that our baby won't follow in our footsteps. So the fact that the Jewish leaders don't want the minister's message in the ear of the youth is a very important issue. You know, recently the Final Call, our brilliant editor, Brother Richard Muhammad, he wrote an article defending Erykah Badu because they came after Erykah Badu. She did music a few years ago, highly complimentary and praising the minister in the nation. She said Minister Farrakhn is a brave and a beautiful human being. And so they began to interview her because, again, now this is a sister that's a musician. Why does her and Farrakhn even come up in the same conversation? Right. You know what I mean? But they're always looking. See, notice they call it the Farrakhn litmus test. Some of you who went to chemistry class, and I remember I went, but I didn't do too well in the class. But I remember the litmus test was to determine if a substance was an acid or a base. That's right. And see, an acid is something that is caustic. It burns things. It consumes things. And the message of Minister Farrakhn, I believe somewhere in the scripture, Minister Charles, it says, and he would consume them with the spirit of his mouth. So I don't care, brother and sister, if you don't wear a bow tie or a headpiece or a hijab. If you're in the African American community, the Latino community, the Dominican community, the Asian community. See, all of these are communities where the minister has influence. When you get up into your field of endeavor, among those who are the most powerful in your field of endeavor, you're going to be given a question. Because they want to see, are you possessed of this acid that God has introduced into America to be corrosive to the idea and the institutions of white supremacy. So everywhere our prominent brothers and sisters are, they are challenged. And if they fail the test, they become the target of crucifixion. So Rick Ross, he got into legal trouble after he supported the minister in 10-10-15. The Game, he got into legal trouble after he came out in support of the minister. They went after Diddy, he was arrested, as well as 2 Chainz. Even our brother, Young Thug and Kanye, they suffered being a part of this wicked plot to kill Lazarus. Come on now. One of the things that I would have said to the chief priest, and I say to the Jewish leaders, is that they make an error in calculation in terms of the influence of Lazarus and the influence of the black leaders of today. See, it wasn't because of Lazarus that the people were believing in Jesus. It was because of Jesus' anointing and because he was on time.
Right.
That which was of yearning in the hearts and the breasts of the people, when they had an engagement and an encounter or experienced Jesus, they believed.
Right.
So they really were going after the wrong culprit, if you will.
Right.
It wasn't because of Lazarus. It was because of what God had did in and was working through Jesus. Likewise, it is today. The ADL think that if Farrakhn has a picture taken with Rick Ross or Kanye, that they are adding to the minister's fame and popularity. No, their fame and popularity is being added to by them and their association with the minister.
That's right.
In fact, about it, the minister has been on the scene much longer than the rappers have been. The minister is an institution. He is the messenger of Allah in America today. Students of the Holy Quran, you know, every nation is to have a warner. So you can be big in the enemy's world as an entertainer, a politician, or a celebrity, but you're small in the eyes of Allah God. Especially as many of our entertainers promote filth and indecency as an art form. Entertainment in America is one of the tools of the Jewish leaders to socially engineer savagery among our people. So let's just be clear. The net beneficiary of these meetings between the minister and celebrities is not the minister. It is the celebrities. Because perhaps Allah will be merciful to them because they were kind to his servant. Perhaps their status in the eyes of Allah God, as he is now judging America, will be raised because they, as the scripture says, if you just give my servants a cool drink of water, you'll see it. Yes, sir. I think I'll take it. Go ahead. But you know, brothers and sisters, it's funny because sometimes when we begin to talk about scripture and our suffering and our condition, people say, y'all going too far. They don't mind the minister being an old black man. They don't mind assessing his social relevance, his political influence. But when you begin to talk about him from the perspective of the divine, a lot of people draw the line. But did you know that when our ancestors who were on plantations and in bondage, many of them could not even, they weren't literate, don't mean they were dumb.
There you go, brother.
They just had not been taught how to recognize English characters and words. Very highly intelligent. If you look in a book called Jews Selling Blacks, you see the ads were for engineers. And these were black folks that were being sold. They were engineers, millwrights, carpenters, surveyors. In an America where teaching a slave to read was against the law. But in their simple understanding, when they began to be given religion, they naturally drew parallels from what they were learning of God and the Bible and religion to their experience as slaves. So it wasn't difficult for them to begin to, in their minds, say, well, man, if the master teaching us about these slaves that was in bondage under Pharaoh in Egypt, and God delivered them through a Moses. And certainly he has to love us enough to give us a Moses too. And so it's no surprise that over the history we have identified great ones like Marcus Garvey. And he was dubbed the Black Moses. Even our great sister Harriet Tubman, leading our brothers and sisters along the Underground Railroad from the South to freedom in the North and Canada. It's called the like Moses.
Right.
Well, that's appropriate, I think. See, but you have to remember that many years after Moses came the most important man in all of the Bible.
Yes.
And that man was Jesus.
Yes. Okay.
So don't you think if we could conceive of a leader from among us fitting the description of a Moses, at a certain point in time a leader would emerge from among us fitting the description of a Jesus.
Yes, sir. Right.
That just makes sense to me, but you know, I don't know about you.
Come on now.
Professor Albert J. Rabbitoe talks about our ancestors and their understanding of religion. He says there's no part of the Bible with which the slaves are so familiar as the story of the deliverance of the children of Israel. He said Moses is their ideal of all that is high and noble and perfect in man. I think they have been accustomed to regard Christ even, not so much in the light of spiritual deliverance, but as that of a second Moses, who would eventually lead them out of their prison house of bondage. I would respectfully submit that the most honorable Elijah Muhammad and the honorable Louis Farrakhn both fit the description of Jesus. Right. If Marcus Garvey and Harriet Tubman could be like our Moses, then we should expect, where's our Jesus?
Yes.
That makes sense to me. And that's why I said earlier, this controversy with the Jews is very helpful in identifying the true role and function of our beloved Master. In fact, it helps us to see the minister really as the Jesus of our time.
Yes. Right.
If you can't see it in no other way, then understand that the conditions of oppression and suffering. See, Moses was about law. These were strong themes in Moses' time and in his ministry. Law, certainly liberation, the punishment of the oppressor, separation. Jesus in his ministry, he had the same themes. But above all of those, what Jesus emphasized was love. Now, I don't mean love in a mushy kind of way, but love from this perspective. Somewhere in the scripture it says, perfect love casts out fear. So Jesus became a thorn in the side of the Jewish leaders. Not because he was just trying to be a badass. Not just because he wanted to just be talking noise. A tough guy with swagger. No. He became a thorn in the side of the Jewish leaders because of his love for God, his love for righteousness, and his love for the people who had been suffering under the Jewish leaders' wicked oppression. And so that's what gave him the courage to condemn them.
That's right.
That's what gave him the courage to challenge them when everybody else was afraid.
Right.
Look at some of these parallels from the gospel narrative of Jesus to the actual modern history of Minister Farrakhn. The Bible says in the book of John, the 7th chapter, the 13th verse, but no one had courage to speak favorably about him in public, for they were afraid of getting in trouble. In our book, Who Do They Say I Am?, we catalog the character witness testimonies of many prominent, over 100 prominent men and women, entertainers, politicians. And we're not organizing and cataloging them to legitimate the minister.
Right.
Quite the contrary. We have organized them as character witnesses for the defense of the minister. Literally like affidavits, if you will, testifying to the minister's history, his character, and his beneficial impact. Part of what made the crucifixion of of Jesus in the New Testament so easy was that there were no character witnesses for Jesus. The man with the withered hand, he didn't show up. The woman with the issue of blood didn't show up. Lazarus didn't show up. The multitudes that he had fed, they didn't show up. The Syrophoenician's daughter, she didn't show up. Heck, most of the disciples didn't even show up. But in the case of the modern Jesus, we already have their testimonies documented. One of them is from this brother, journalist William Raspberry. Washington area journalist. He said it very frankly. He said, Farrakhn says what so many black people believe, but have learned not to say in public. Why have you learned not to speak your mind in public? Who are you afraid of?
Right.
He said, for instance, that Jews wield tremendous influence in the news and entertainment media. That doesn't mean that most blacks accept Farrakhan's notion of a small Jewish cabal that meets in Hollywood or in a Park Avenue apartment to decide which ideas and trends ought to be foisted off on the public. But few of us doubt the disproportionate influence of Jews, for good or ill, on what we see on television or in the movies. Nor do blacks doubt the disproportionate influence of Jews on American foreign policy, particularly with regard to political and economic support of Israel. But we also know that to say these things is to be accused of anti-Semitism. That's why blacks can cheer when Farrakhan says them, even if it goes overstated. So you, without knowing, and that's a thing that if you are watching the news, America that has for many years portrayed itself as the democratic capital of the world, is slowly beginning to outlaw certain ideas. Quiet under the radar. Right now, both the ADL and the Southern Poverty Law Center and other Jewish groups are working together. See, you know the Southern Poverty Law Center, they send this report out calling us a hate group.
Yes, sir.
They call the Black Panthers a hate group. Any group that speaks for black independence or black separatism, they call them a hate group.
Yes, sir.
Well, legally, that designation has no standing in a court of law. But on the other side of town is the ADL, working to actually get laws against hate speech and hate groups. And that strategy and that work really is very, very serious. Because you could wake up one Sunday morning, Minister Charles, and find out that your ministry is now considered against the law. And you wonder why the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, according to the minister, said that he would definitely keep 5 mosques open. Man, we got over 100 mosques. What did he see or understand that would make him say, no, we will fight for these? Because the day may come in the foreseeable future where the life-giving teaching of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as taught by Minister Farrakhn, may be against the law. That's right. But this is serious. Look at what the Bible says. It says that in John 7:1, after this Jesus traveled through Galilee. He did not want to travel in Judea because the Jews there were trying to kill him. Me and Minister Charles were talking about the heyday of the rebuilding. And I don't know if you've ever seen when our great brother, we allowed to be pleased with him, Dr. Khalid Muhammad, took to task Irv Rubin from the JDL in Los Angeles. Because they had nerve enough to protest outside the minister's speaking engagement. That's right. That's right. Who do you want, Farrakhn? How do you want him? Dead. So they have for years quietly planned to kill the minister. According to Professor Matthias Gardell, pickets with Jews shouting, "Who do we want? Farrakhn, How Do We Want Him Dead, are far from unusual, and the Jewish Defense Organization had Farrakhn on top of the death list, found by police investigating a bombing of Arab American facilities. The Jewish Defense League staged at least one death to Farrakhn mark, Savior's Day, October 7, 1985. So again, what are you looking at? The same thing that happened in the life of Jesus in the New Testament is happening in the life of your and my brother inside of America.
Right.
Now, surely, I mean, we all are skeptical of snake oil salesmen, but you gotta know this stuff ain't made up.
Right.
You can't make this up. John 12 and 42, nevertheless, many of the leaders believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, for fear that they would be put out of the synagogue. This is our brother Nasir Jones, better known as Knox. And he interviewed with the Final Call newspaper, and he said he felt some kind of way once he was sitting in the audience at a concert for the group Coldplay. And he was there with other Hollywood celebrities and whatnot, and Coldplay, as they are warming up, they're introducing their set with excerpts of speeches of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. And I said, damn, this is a white group, but they ain't afraid to say they're down with Farrakhan. And I have loved the minister for years, but I have felt that I've had to keep it a secret out of fear. And then right after that, he did the song devoted to the minister. This is one of my favorites. You remember, the Bible says when Jesus went somewhere, he turned water into wine. No, that's not why it's my favorite. I don't want y'all to get the wrong idea. I've never tasted this stuff. Anyway, but think over this and compare that to what journalist Kevin Powell said. He said, God knows when I heard Farrakhn, I had never heard a black man talk like that. It blew my mind, absolutely blew my mind. It was intoxicating. Intoxicating as crack was for a lot of people in our communities in the 80s. Again, you can't make this up. You can't make it up. Now, if I've ever been intoxicated, it was high off of some Islam. I just assure you. But this Jewish controversy, a lot of us, when we hear about it, we kind of turn our ears off because we don't really understand it. We're like, man, what's this whole thing with the Jews? I just, man, you know, I'm down with making our community safe places to live, etc., etc. But you know, brothers and sisters, when Dr. King went into Chicago, he said that once they began to fight for the rights of the people, he noticed something. He said that whenever they finally got to the people that they had to deal with, who may have been slumlords, who may have been predatory businesses in the black community, he noticed they were all members of the Jewish community.
Yes, sir.
That's what Dr. King said.
Yes, sir.
In the founding, I want to share with you a little piece of hidden history. In the founding of the Nation of Islam, our Savior, the great Master, Allah God in the person,
Yes, sir.
appeared in Detroit. In Detroit, the Jewish community was involved in criminal activity, primarily through a group called the Purple Gang.
Yes, sir.
The first temple was on Hastings Street, which is where the Purple Gang originated from. Now, compare and contrast. Professor Robert Rockaway, Jewish professor at Tel Aviv University, talks about how the Purple Gang controlled bootlegging, gambling, drugs, murder, prostitution in Detroit in the 20s and 30s. Now, our Savior comes into Detroit, and he gives 25,000 holy names. Which means that he taught at least 25,000 of our people who believed in him, came under his influence, came under what he was teaching, which, mind you, are all of these things that the Jewish purple gang was promoting. Master Farrakhn Muhammad's teaching condemned. So the nation begins in Detroit, helping to clean up and to reform and to purify the black man and woman. On scene at the same time is the powerful purple gang, who is helping to corrupt black men and women. And if you will remember, at a certain point, the authorities asked Master Farrakhn Muhammad to get out of Detroit. Now, on further, we can show you evidence where Jewish leaders have been in collusion with law enforcement. In 1942, they sent in spies into our temple in Chicago and brought law enforcement in to arrest over 80 members of the Nation of Islam. So, right here from the very start, it didn't begin really their opposition to us with 1984 Jesse Jackson's so-called better religion remark. They desire a presence among us to where they can corrupt us and control us. And the nation is the only reality that interferes with that. Do you know that part of why the minister called Million Man March was to counter the negative, globally exported image of black people through Hollywood and through entertainment? Hollywood began with this movie called Birth of a Nation, which was essentially a Ku Klux Klan recruitment film. It is how the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer movie company, which is run by members of the Jewish community. That's how they got their start. This is how Hollywood began, with this movie, a KKK recruitment film called Birth of a Nation. And it was so lucrative financially, they made enough money to start MGM. One of the screenwriters says what Hollywood have done to the image of people of color. They made tarts of the Negro's daughters, crap shooters of his sons, obsequious Uncle Toms of his fathers, superstitious and grotesque crones of his mothers, strutting peacocks of his successful men, psalm-singing mountebanks of his priests, and Barnum and Bailey sideshows of his religion. So we could trace some kind of beneficial presence among us, it wouldn't be such an issue. But there's something in the Bible, if you will remember. It says something like this. And they took the gold and the silver vessels of God, and they defiled them with wine and liquor and strong drink and prostitution. I heard a beautiful exegesis of this passage from the minister. So this is not talking about the plates and saucers and cups of God, but it's talking about a people. See, you and I, beloved brother and sister, in our natural state, we are reflections of God. We are born to be possessors of God's mind and spirit. So there are those who have an understanding of that, even if we don't have an understanding of ourselves. And they understand that if you want to control us, you have to corrupt us. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad put in his teachings that part of what Yaqub taught his made man was how to master the original. The way you master the original people is you take them away from their spiritual base. You separate them from the Spirit of God. You defile them. You corrupt them. And everywhere there is some form of corruption. If it's narcotics, you find a member of the synagogue there. If it's prostitution or pornography, you find a member of the synagogue there. Right now, the black community, the Hispanic community, the Native American community, all over the country is dealing with various issues with our youth. Alcoholism, drug addiction, domestic violence, homicide. The minister has said that our communities have a form of socially engineered savagery taking place. One of the main weapons that they use is entertainment and music. And you find at the head of all of your major entertainment companies are members of the synagogue, members of the Jewish community. And yet, the music that you hear is always calling our women out of their name.
That's right.
It's glorifying drug use. It's glorifying solving our problems through shooting and killing each other. They don't promote that music in the Jewish community.
That's right.
That music can't be played in the Jewish synagogue. But members of the synagogue, members of the Jewish community are creating, promoting, and distributing that music to poor people in the black community. So this is why they don't like the message of the minister. They know the minister never called Judaism a gutter religion. In fact, about it, it actually helped to end the career of CNN Sandy Freeman. You can watch it on the internet. She tried this, this gotcha journalism, so she's going to actually play the tape of what the minister said and then put on the teleprompter gutter, but the tape, you don't hear the term gutter.
That's right.
You hear the term dirty. And then the minister explained, see, your religion is not what you claim, it's not what you profess, it's what you practice. It's like there are many immigrant Muslims who practice a dirty religion.
That's right.
They set up convenience stores and they do business in the hood. And they sell to us things they know Allah has decreed us to be. Alcohol and cigarettes. And doing all other manner of illicit things because they practice a dirty religion, even though if you ask them, they would say that they are Muslim. That is Islam. And then they say the nation, we not true Muslims.
Right. That's what they say.
But you would never find a member of the Nation of Islam setting up a business to sell our people that which God had forbidden.
Right.
So we love our people, and we know we can't be good at the ADL has a sordid history of racism and illicit activity. And yet they want to claim that the minister is some pariah, that famous folks should be afraid to take a photo with. They got a hell of a nerve, man. A hell of a nerve. We put in our latest book called Hail Elijah, Hallelujah, we talk about when the 3 civil rights workers lost their life in Philadelphia, Mississippi. And their murders were the subject of the old movie from the 80s and 90s called Mississippi Burning. One of those young men was Andrew Goodman. Now, for many years, Jewish leaders tried to point him out as a case in point of how the Jews had given their life to help black people get civil rights. Well, we discovered a 32-page essay that Andrew Goodman had written that is favorable of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam.
Wow.
Mr. Lyndon LaRouche's organization published a book called The Ugly Truth about the ADL. And in that book, they talk about how the ADL helped to pay bail for the murderers of the 3 civil rights workers. They have been found to be guilty of spying on black organizations.
That's right.
They spied on Dr. King.
That's right.
He was the meek and mild alternative to the black nationalism of the Nation of Islam, and yet they were spying on him, helping to get him assassinated. But as I conclude, beloved brothers and sisters, in spite of all of this, the minister continues. And he has been identified by them as the last man standing.
That's right. That's right.
See, Black America for the last 8 years, we have fastened upon Barack Obama. Even though he was never the quote-unquote black leader, he did not have an agenda that addressed the needs of the black community or the Latino community. He appeared to be a benefit to certain other communities, but certainly not us. He's gone, but he captured the imagination and fascination of the people. He's gone. Who else, when you look across the leadership landscape, do you see? They say you can tell a lot of a man by what his enemies have to say. This is Abraham Foxman, who was the leader of the ADL. And these are statements in something that's kind of like his exit interview. You know, because poor old Abe, you know, he really only had one assignment. Stop Farrakhn. That's right. And he failed. So they called him in the office and gave him a watch. He said, you know, when we look at the black community, we only see one leader. Farrakhn. Brothers and sisters, think about that. The minister's almost 85. Watch me say Farrakhn can draw 20,000 people out several times a year.
That's right.
Most people who are drawing those numbers is an entertainer.
Right.
Is a singer.
Right.
Is a hip hop artist.
Right.
Beyonce or somebody on that high level get 20,000 several times a year. What do they call it? An octogenarian? 80 plus years of age? What even 80-year-old person do you know can stand and teach for 4 hours? And I respectfully submit, he is a Jesus among us.
Yes, sir.
If you don't believe that, look at the reaction of the Jewish leaders to you. One of the things our beloved Christian family I often find out are oblivious to. Because you can turn on Sunday morning and see preachers celebrating Israel, talking about they the people of God and this and that. Yet the Jews don't believe in Jesus.
Right.
Do you know that there are Jewish scholars who have put together a new version of the New Testament? And all of these scriptures I have shown you, is in King James, New International Version, etc. They are rewording them because they say that anti-Semitism is rooted in the charge that the Jews killed Jesus. So think about it. They are willing to change the scriptures for their political agenda. Think about that. I thought we were supposed to be committed to truth. See, the Quran tells the Muslims, speak the truth even if it is against yourself. So Muslims, if we did something, we own up to it. We try to atone, reconcile, seek forgiveness. But these are people who want to hide the evil misdeeds.
Right.
And I say the tragedy to me of this whole situation is that the minister is so valuable to us. And he has defended all of us, but most of the time he's not the beneficiary of a defense. Theology professor Andre C. Willis said of the minister, there's simply no black person in the world that has over so many years been as consistent, as unrestricted, and as forthright in defending the humanity of black people throughout the world against this attack. He's defended the Bloods, the Crips, the Baptists, the Methodists, the Masons, the Elders. He defended Jesse Jackson, Marion Barry, Warner Brawley, Alcee Hastings. In another presentation, I give a laundry list of all of the people that the minister has helped them to salvage their reputation, save their careers, and actually save their life.
Right.
But when he is falsely accused of being an anti-Semite and a bad man, none of those people ever show up. So again, just like Jesus, being crucified, but all of those that had benefited from his good, they are silent. They have not heard from him. I don't know about you, brothers and sisters, but I think we should be different.
Yes, sir.
We are not prominent or famous folk necessarily in this room, but the Bible says it was the poor that heard Jesus last.
Right.
And the book of Revelation says at the return of the Messiah, the earth would swallow up the flood. Now that's symbolic language, but it's talking about a flood of lies and propaganda aimed at derailing the momentum of the messenger of Allah and the little small baby nation that he is developing. The scripture says the earth, meaning the people, they swallowed up the flood. In other words, the flood went forth, but it didn't hurt the messenger and the baby nation he was carrying because the people became immune to it. So I pray that our people and our communities, because of our work, I'm happy to see in Phoenix, there's the 10,000 Fearless Initiative taking place. I'm happy to see we're feeding our people. All praise be to God. Because the more good that we do, that's actually a form of the defense of our God. Because the minister has said, I wish my black brothers and sisters would help Brother Farrakhn to get out of prison. I am not in a prison of steel bars. I am in a prison of public opinion, manipulated by the media and their hatred of the truth that is in my mouth that would set our people free. Help me to get out of prison. Stop looking at the Nation of Islam as though we are some enemy to black people. So my encouragement and my call to action is twofold. We must continue the good work that we are doing in our communities, wherever we live. But we must also lift our voices, lift our pens, use whatever platform we have to stand on and to speak from to defend the good of the Honorable Minister Farrakhn. Minister said, God blesses you when you defend the truth. Say that again. God blesses you when you defend the truth. The minister has given us so much truth. He has been a personification and embodiment of truth. I think he's worthy of our defense. Come on, brothers and sisters, let's hear about Before I ask some very important questions, I want to ask you, does anyone have a question for our brother today? Anyone? Any one of our visitors or guests that they have a question based on what he talked about today? Is there any questions? Anyone? Yes, sir, my brother. Please stand.
Why is there any division amongst, because it's Black History Month, first and foremost. I love my people, so okay, but there shouldn't be any division among my brother that I was so blessed to bring me here, said our sisters were looking in the mirror and they were looking down on themselves. The black is beautiful, and our sisters should never be ashamed of themselves. The black is beautiful. Yes. So I got a panther on my arm, so I love my people.
Yes, sir.
At all times, and I think that black is love my people. So the truth should always never be, what I'm trying to say, use the right words. Maybe probably help me say the right words.
We feel you,
The
brother.
truth should never be hidden.
Yes,
You know
sir.
what I mean? And we should never hate on anybody. With that being said, I just would ask my Heavenly Father to help me to say the things that I want to say that I can't say right now. But I appreciate my brother bringing me here because the truth should not be hidden.
Yes, sir.
And our people should be protected at all times.
Yes, sir. Was there a question or just your statement there, brother? We hear you, we feel your statement.
My question was, there shouldn't be any division between brethren at any time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
What the devil would want, right? That was my question.
Just thank you for coming out, brother. Appreciate you. We certainly agree with you 1,000%. Is there anyone else who has a question? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Please stand.
Please, is there a reason why you're not referring to the Jews as the Zionists, which I believe would be a more fitting term when you're referring to those people with that political agenda, Zionists?
Well, some people use that term, but in our research, we haven't determined that there's really an appreciable difference between those who have that political ideology and those who don't. There are those who don't share that political ideology, but yet they still oppose the minister, and they still are involved in corrupt activities in the black community. So that, sometimes brothers and sisters, you have brothers and sisters from the Hebrew community and things like that who say that the black man woman is the real Jew, and we believe that. We believe we are the true Jew, but those that have adopted that and are known as that, whether they be of the Sephardic or Ashkenazi, those who are of European Jewry, they have a history that is inclusive of Zionism. But Zionism in and of itself is not the only thing that we're talking about. Theodore Herzl, who is widely acknowledged as the father of Zionism, that comes around the 1890s. But you have to understand, you get a book called A Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. They were involved in the transatlantic slave trade.
Right.
They were also a part of the Confederacy.
Right.
And it's intriguing to me that as many of the activists and people for Black Lives Matter, etc., they are going around the country taking down Confederate monuments. And I agree that that's worthwhile. But one of the hidden things is that, there was a Jewish man who was on the face of the currency of the Confederacy. The Confederacy, when they seceded from the Union, they printed their own money. They put a man's face on it, Judah G. Benjamin. They also supported the KKK. They did a lot of things to undermine the black community that didn't have anything to do with Zionism at all, even though I agree with you, Zionism is an evil political ideology.
I got a question.
Yes, sir, beloved.
I brought everybody out here from the city of Phoenix, and Minister Farrakhn. And we wanted to know, I want to know personally, is there any way that the city of Phoenix can meet the minister?
Well, we can check on that.
It'd be inspirational for the youth,
Yes, sir.
for the streets, for everybody. That's why we're here.
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir. Well,
I've seen the brother. I've heard about the brother that I have in the house out here for a long time. This is South Phoenix. But we never had seen the brother.
Yes, sir.
So it would definitely be impactful for the community. And it would definitely be a life-changing situation for a lot of the youth,
Yes,
a lot of the OGs, a lot of people that's out here. We want to see the brother.
Yes, sir.
And,
What's your name, my brother?
my name is Stickop.
What is it?
Stickop. S-T-I-C-C.
Got you. Got you. We will work on that to see if that's possible. The minister, he loves the youth. He loves the brothers in the street. So we will see what we can do to make that happen. If there was any kind of miscommunication that would take place.
There was definitely miscommunication.
Okay.
I made a big announcement.
Yes,
That
sir.
the brother was gonna be here today.
Yes, sir.
He's not here.
Right.
That makes me look bad.
Yes, sir.
I like that.
Yes, sir. We will try to make that happen, brother. And the miscommunication, we knew that the minister was trying to get here today. That's why we didn't put it out there like that. Okay?
The brother that told me to announce it like that, that's why I do it. I don't do nothing out of order.
Okay?
I'm a brother in line.
Yes, sir.
About order.
We-
I asked the brother, he told me, I asked him 3 times, and